For most of human history, progress was, well, it was slow, almost invisible. But then, starting around 1760, a series of inventions, mostly in Great Britain, kicked off this incredible chain reaction that would completely remake our world. Seriously, economic historians agree this was the single most important event in human history since we first figured out how to farm. So let's dive into how this unbelievable transformation actually happened.
So take a look at this. This is the world before the revolution. It's a weaver's workshop back in 1747. Everything you see, the looms, the spinning wheel, it's all powered by people, by muscle. Production was super small scale, it was all done in little cottages, and it was unbelievably slow. For thousands of years, this was pretty much the ceiling on how much stuff humanity could make.
And because of that, life for the average person just didn't really change all that much. If you look at a graph of GDP per capita or the average standard of living, it's basically a flat line for centuries. Generations lived and died in a world that looked and felt almost exactly the same as the one their great-great-grandparents knew.
So what on earth happened? How did we get from that world, that static, unchanging world, to the one we're in today, with skyscrapers and smartphones and things flying all over the globe? How did it all shift so completely, and in the grand scheme of things, so incredibly fast?
Well, this is the answer. I mean, just look at this. This picture is from less than 100 years after that first one. It's a textile factory in 1835, and the scale is just mind-boggling. You've got rows and rows of iron machines, all working together, all powered by something that never gets tired. This wasn't just a small step up, it was a totally new way of making things.
So how did we get from that little cottage to this massive factory? It's funny, it didn't start with some grand plan. It all started with a single problem, in a single industry, making cloth. A few clever inventions in textiles created a chain reaction that nobody could have possibly seen coming.
And this brings us to a really important idea, the bottleneck. It all kicks off in 1733 with something called the flying shuttle. It basically lets one weaver do the work of two. Now that sounds great, right? But here's the thing. It created a massive problem. The weavers were now so fast, they were using up thread way faster than anyone could make it. Suddenly, you needed somewhere between 4 and 8 spinners just to supply one weaver. You had a massive thread shortage, and that kicked off this frantic race to figure out how to spin faster.
And that race led to these amazing machines. Over on the left, you've got the spinning jenny from 1764. It was a huge breakthrough that let a single worker spin a bunch of spools of thread all at once. Then, you get the spinning mule in 1779, which was a kind of hybrid machine that could make thread that was both stronger and finer than anything you could do by hand. The bottleneck wasn't just solved, it was absolutely shattered.
Okay, so what happens when you can suddenly make huge amounts of high-quality thread for cheap? The whole industry just explodes. The demand for raw cotton to feed these new machines went through the roof, and you could feel that demand all across the globe. To really get a sense of the scale of this change, you just got to look at two numbers. So, back in 1750, before these inventions really hit their stride, Great Britain was importing about 2.5 million pounds of raw cotton. All right, remember that number, 2.5 million. Now, fast forward a century to 1850. That number jumped to, get this, 588 million pounds. That's more than a 200 times increase. This wasn't just growth, it was a complete technology-driven revolution.
But of course, solving one problem just creates another. This textile boom created new bottlenecks. All those new machines, they needed to be built out of something way stronger than wood. And the water wheels that powered the first factories, well, you could only build them next to a river. The revolution needed stronger stuff and a brand new source of power.
Let's talk about the material first, iron. So the old school way to make iron used charcoal, which, comes from wood. The problem was Britain was running out of forests. The solution, believe it or not, was right under their feet, huge amounts of coal. The real breakthrough came when innovators figured out how to use something called coke, which is a purified form of coal, to fuel the blast furnaces. This unlocked a nearly limitless supply of cheap, strong iron. And the impact was, you guessed it, staggering. In 1720, Britain produced a measly 400 tons of iron using coke. Less than a century later, by 1806, that number was 250,000 tons. This iron became the literal framework of the new industrial age, used for absolutely everything from machines and bridges to buildings.
Okay, now for the power. The first real steam engine, the new Coleman engine, was actually developed to pump water out of coal mines.
It was a beast for sure, but it was incredibly inefficient, just ate up fuel. The real game changer was James Watt's engine. It wasn't just an improvement, it was a radical leap forward. So why was Watt's engine so much better? It all came down to one brilliant idea: the separate condenser. See, before Watt, the engine's main cylinder had to be cooled down and then heated back up with every single stroke, which wasted a ton of energy. Watt's genius was to move the cooling process to a separate chamber. This meant the main cylinder stayed hot all the time, which cut fuel use by about 75%. That's a huge deal. Suddenly, steam power was cheap enough to use pretty much anywhere, for anything.
All right, so now we have factories pumping out unbelievable amounts of goods. They're made from cheap iron and powered by super efficient steam engines. This, of course, creates the next big bottleneck. How in the world do you move all this stuff around?
The solution came in waves. First up were the canals. The Bridgewater Canal, which opened in 1761, was so successful it literally cut the price of coal in Manchester in half. That sparked a canal mania, with canals being dug everywhere. Then, guys like John McAdam figured out how to build much better, more durable roads. But the ultimate breakthrough, the real game changer, was putting that steam engine on wheels. When the Liverpool and Manchester Railway opened in 1830, it proved to everyone that railways were the future. And this quote from an early railway experiment just shows you why it was such a big deal. On a normal road, a horse could pull maybe a ton. But on these new iron rails, a witness reported seeing a single horse pull 3 tons of weight for 6 miles with ease. The massive drop in friction made rail unbelievably efficient. It basically shrunk the country and created a real national market for the first time.
So this whole cascade of innovation, in textiles, then iron, then steam, then transportation, it didn't just change a few industries. It permanently, fundamentally remade society itself, and its effects are all around us today.
The world was just completely remade. The factory became the new center of life. Millions of people moved from the countryside into cities that were growing at an insane rate. For the first time in human history, the population started to grow exponentially, and eventually, so did the average person's standard of living. Now, of course, this also created new social classes, the factory workers and the factory owners. And with them came a whole new set of political tensions that would really define the next century.
Let's just pause on that for a second. This wasn't just another period of history. This was a fundamental break with everything that came before. It was a shift in the human story that's right up there with the agricultural revolution 10,000 years earlier. This is the event that created the modern world. Period.
And if you needed one single symbol for this new age, it would have to be the Crystal Palace. It was built in London for the Great Exhibition of 1851, and it was just this breathtaking cathedral made of iron and glass, and it was filled with all the technological marvels the revolution had created. It was basically a giant statement to the rest of the world that a new era had dawned.
So the crucial thing to take away from all this is that the Industrial Revolution wasn't just one invention. It was a cascade of them, where each solution created a new problem, which in turn sparked even more innovation. It totally remade our world in ways that the people who started it could never ever have imagined. Which leaves us with one final thought. What cascade of innovation is happening right now, and what kind of world is it building for all of us?